You ever have one of those moments where you realize you've changed? Like really changed. Not just in the small ways, but in the deep, unsettling way that makes you question everything you used to believe? That's where I've been. And I won't pretend it's been easy. See, this wasn't the kind of change that comes from just learning a few new things or growing a little wiser with age. This was deeper, more disruptive, the kind of shift that forces you to rethink the foundation you've built your life on. The biggest shift in my life has been in my faith, something that I hold dear. I remember the exact moment I decided to follow Christ. I was in my first year of university, sitting alone in my room. No one pressured me. No emotional music, no perfectly crafted sermon. Just me, wrestling with this undeniable pull toward something bigger than myself. That decision changed everything. Faith became the center of my world. Church wasn't just a place I went on Sundays. It was home, a family I loved deeply, and I was loved in return. My commitment wasn't casual. I poured everything into it. My time, my energy, my identity. For years, it felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I was working in ministry, leading, building something that felt meaningful. My life had purpose, and I was surrounded by people who shared it. But here's the thing about passion. If you're not careful, it can blind you. I didn't realize it at the time, but somewhere along the way, I stopped asking questions. I stopped wrestling with scripture for myself. Instead of seeking God in the quiet, just Him and me, I let sermons and books do the thinking for me. I assumed that because something was taught from a pulpit, it had to be true. I never stopped to consider that some of the things I believed weren't actually from God. They were just traditions, human interpretations passed down as absolute truth. And slowly, without realizing it, I lost something important. I lost the ability to think critically about my faith. Maybe you've been there too. I don't know exactly when the exhaustion set in. Maybe it had been creeping up for years. All I know is that one day I woke up and realized I was running on empty. I had given so much for so long that I didn't even recognize the weight of it until it became unbearable. So I did what I thought I needed to do. I stepped away for a while, moved to another country, focused on my studies. I thought distance would bring clarity. Instead, it brought something else. Questions, big ones. Questions about doctrine, about church culture, about the way we define faith. Questions I had pushed aside for years because I was too busy, too invested, too afraid of where they might lead. And when I finally came back home, everything felt different. I left the denomination I had been a part of my entire Christian life, moved to a new city, joined a different church, started over in ways I never thought I would. And for the first time in a long time, I sat with my faith, not as something handed to me, but as something I had to rebuild from the ground up. I had to ask myself, what do I actually believe? What's true because it's biblical, and what's just tradition wrapped in religious language? And most importantly, who is Jesus to me, outside of the systems, outside of the expectations, outside of the noise? It was disorienting, lonely even. Some relationships faded, not because they didn't matter, but because I needed space to process, to let the shift happen without the pressure to explain it. And yet, through all of it, one thing remained: Jesus. Stripped of all the layers, all the assumptions, all the added weight. He was still there, still steady, still true. Looking back, I get why this shift had to happen. The faith I had before wasn't entirely my own. It was built on borrowed convictions, on things I absorbed rather than discovered. And when life shook me, when the ground beneath me moved, the pieces that weren't solid had to break away. It wasn't easy. It still isn't. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Faith isn't about holding on to the past just because it's familiar. It's about seeking truth, even when it costs you. So if you've ever found yourself in a place like this, questioning, wrestling, wondering if you're the only one feeling this way, you're not alone. And I know it's tempting to just push through, to ignore the tension, to keep going because it's what you've always done. But maybe, just maybe, this shift isn't something to be afraid of. Maybe it's an invitation, because there's beauty in the breaking, purpose in the process. And on the other side of the shift, something real, something unshakable, something worth holding on to.